The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Prince George adjusted his small navy blazer for the third time. At 10 years old, he had already attended dozens of royal engagements, but today felt different somehow. The annual Children's Hospital charity event was one of his favorites because he got to meet kids his own age, even if most of them were much braver than he felt he could ever be. Standing beside the ornate palace gates, Sergeant James Mitchell checked his watch and straightened his ceremonial red tunic. 23 years of service in the Royal Guard had taught him to notice everything, while appearing to notice nothing at all. His steel-gray eyes scanned the growing crowd of photographers and well-wishers gathering along the street. The familiar weight of his bearskin hat and the precise positioning of his rifle had become second nature, but lately, something had been weighing heavily on his mind. James had joined the Royal Guard fresh out of military academy, full of pride and purpose. His grandfather had served Queen Elizabeth II, and his father had protected Prince Charles during his younger years. The Mitchell family legacy of royal service ran deep, like roots in ancient soil. But 3 months ago, everything had changed when James received a phone call that shattered his world into pieces. His 8-year-old daughter Emma had been diagnosed with leukemia. The doctors spoke in careful, measured tones about treatment options and survival rates. But all James could think about was how small and fragile she looked in that hospital bed, her bright blonde curls already beginning to thin from the chemotherapy. His wife Sarah had been strong, holding everything together while he maintained his duties at the palace. But he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her smile had become something she wore like a mask. The other guards had noticed his distraction. Captain Williams had pulled him aside twice, asking if he needed time off, but James had refused. The Royal Guard was everything to him. It was his identity, his family's honor, his entire sense of purpose. How could he abandon his post when the royal family needed protection? Yet every morning when he put on his uniform, he thought about Emma asking why Daddy had to go to work when she felt so sick. Prince George emerged from the palace doors, flanked by his security detail and private secretary. The young prince had grown taller over the summer, and his confidence had blossomed during recent public appearances. He waved enthusiastically at the crowd, his genuine smile lighting up his face. Unlike some members of the royal family who seemed to wear their public personas like armor, George appeared genuinely excited to meet people. As the royal entourage approached the waiting car, James noticed something that made him blink twice. Prince George had stopped walking and was staring directly at him. Not through him, as most royals did with the guards, but at him. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and James saw something unexpected in the young prince's gaze. It was not the polite acknowledgement he was accustomed to, but something deeper, more personal. The boy seemed to hesitate, as if debating something internally. His security detail waited patiently, accustomed to the prince's occasionally impulsive nature. George had been known to stop and pet dogs during walkabouts, or to ask detailed questions about street performers' acts. Today, however, his attention was focused entirely on the stoic guard standing at attention. James had been trained never to break character during public appearances. The Royal Guard was meant to be invisible, a silent symbol of strength and tradition. His job was to blend into the background, to be present but unremarkable. Yet something about Prince George's intense stare made him feel exposed, as if the young boy could see through his carefully maintained facade to the worried father beneath. The charity event was scheduled to last 3 hours. Prince George would visit with children receiving treatment, participate in art activities, and help serve lunch in the hospital cafeteria. James would stand guard outside the building,
maintaining his vigilant watch while
his mind inevitably drifted to Emma's latest blood test results and the mounting medical bills that insurance did not cover. What James did not know was that Prince George had been asking questions about the guards recently. During his private tutoring sessions, he had learned about the men and women who protected his family, their backgrounds and their families. His curiosity was not casual interest, but genuine concern for the people who dedicated their lives to royal service. The prince had noticed James over the past few weeks. While most adults thought children were not observant, George had inherited his mother's ability to read people's emotions. He had seen the way James's shoulders seemed heavier lately, the slight tremor in his hands during long ceremonies, and the distant look that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. As the car door opened and Prince George prepared to leave for the hospital visit, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of getting into the vehicle as protocol demanded, he walked directly toward James. The security detail tensed slightly, but they were accustomed to the prince's unpredictable moments of human connection. Standing just a few feet away from the imposing guard, Prince George looked up into James's face. The height difference was considerable, but somehow the young prince commanded the moment. The crowd of photographers noticed the unusual interaction and began taking pictures, their cameras clicking rapidly. What happened next would become the subject of newspaper headlines and social media discussions for weeks to come. But in that moment, it was simply a 10-year-old boy recognizing pain in another person's eyes and deciding to do something about it. Prince George reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a small worn teddy bear. It was not an expensive toy or a royal gift, but rather a simple brown bear with mismatched button eyes that he had carried with him since he was 3 years old. The bear's fur was faded from countless hours of comfort and companionship, and one ear was slightly chewed from George's nervous habit during his early years. James watched in complete bewilderment as the young prince extended the teddy bear toward him. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely outside the realm of royal protocol, that James found himself frozen in place. His training had prepared him for threats, for emergencies, for any number of dangerous scenarios, but no one had ever taught him how to respond when a member of the royal family offered him a childhood comfort toy. "This is Mr. Buttons," Prince George said quietly, his voice carrying just enough for James to hear, but not loud enough for the photographers to catch his words. "He helped me when I was scared about my first day of school, and when I had nightmares about monsters under my bed. I think maybe you need him more than I do right now." The sincerity in the boy's voice hit James like a physical blow. How could this child possibly know about Emma? How could he understand the fear that had been consuming James for months? The guard's carefully maintained composure began to crack as he stared down at the offered teddy bear. "Your Highness," James began, his voice rougher than usual, "I cannot accept gifts while on duty." Prince George tilted his head slightly, a gesture he had inherited from his mother. "It is not really a gift," he explained with the matter-of-fact logic that only children possess. "It is more like lending something to a friend who needs it. Mr. Buttons always comes back to me eventually, but right now I think he wants to help you." The photographers were having a field day, their cameras capturing every moment of this unprecedented interaction. Royal protection officers stood nearby, uncertain whether to intervene or allow the moment to continue. Prince George's private secretary checked her watch nervously, knowing they were already running behind schedule for the hospital visit. James looked into the young prince's eyes and saw something that made his chest tighten with emotion. There was no pity there, no royal condescension or charitable obligation. Instead, he saw genuine kindness and an understanding that seemed far beyond the boy's years. It was the look of someone who recognized pain in another person and wanted to help, regardless of social barriers or protocol. "How did you know?" James whispered, his voice barely audible. Prince George glanced around to make sure no one else could hear their conversation. "My mummy taught me to notice when people are sad. She said that being royal means paying attention to others, especially when they are hurting. You stand here every day protecting us, but your eyes look like you need protecting too." The simple honesty of the statement broke something inside James. For months, he had carried the weight of Emma's illness alone, maintaining his stoic facade while his heart ached with every breath. Sarah was handling the medical appointments and daily care, but James felt helpless, unable to do anything but stand guard while his daughter fought for her life. Prince George continued speaking, his young voice filled with compassion that seemed to come from somewhere deep within his soul. "I heard some of the staff talking about guards who have sick children. I do not know if that is you, but Mr. Buttons has magic powers for making sick people feel better. At least that is what my gran always told me." James realized that the prince was referring to Queen Elizabeth II, who had passed away 2 years earlier. The idea that the queen had once comforted her great-grandson with stories about magical teddy bears made the moment even more poignant. Here was this young boy, heir to the throne, offering his most treasured possession to a guard he barely knew because he sensed someone was in pain. The weight of protocol and duty that had defined James's entire adult life suddenly felt crushing. He was trained to protect the royal family, to maintain distance and professionalism at all times. Yet here was Prince George, breaking every rule of royal engagement to offer comfort to someone he perceived as needing help. "I have a little girl," James found himself saying, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "She is very sick and I do not know how to help her." Prince George nodded solemnly as if this confession confirmed what he had already suspected. "Mr. Buttons helped me when I was scared about my papa becoming king. He will help your little girl too." "What is her name?" "Emma," James replied, surprised by how easily he was sharing personal information with a 10-year-old member of the royal family. "Emma is a beautiful name," Prince George said with the formal politeness he had been taught, but his eyes remained warm and genuine. "Mr. Buttons will take very good care of her. He is excellent at chasing away scary thoughts and making hospital rooms feel less frightening." James felt his eyes begin to water, something that had not happened during his entire military career. The kindness of this gesture, the thoughtfulness behind it, and the complete lack of judgment in Prince George's manner overwhelmed his carefully constructed emotional barriers. The teddy bear felt incredibly light in James's hands, but somehow it carried the weight of hope that he had not felt in months. He looked down at the simple toy with its mismatched eyes and worn fur, understanding that this was not just a child's plaything, but a symbol of something much larger. Prince George smiled, apparently satisfied that his important mission had been accomplished. "You can keep him as long as you need to. He knows the way back to me when his job is finished." As the young prince turned to finally get into the waiting car, James stood holding the teddy bear, feeling as though his entire world had shifted on its axis. The photographers continued taking pictures, unaware that they were documenting a moment that would fundamentally change one man's understanding of duty, family, and what truly mattered in life. As Prince George's car disappeared down the palace drive, James remained motionless, clutching the small teddy bear against his chest. The other guards pretended not to notice his breach of protocol, but he could feel their curious glances. Captain Williams approached with measured steps, his expression carefully neutral. "Mitchell, perhaps you should take your break early today," the captain suggested quietly, his tone suggesting it was more of an order than a recommendation. James nodded wordlessly and walked toward the guard quarters, his mind reeling from what had just occurred. Once inside the small break room, he sat heavily in a chair and stared at Mr. Buttons. The teddy bear's mismatched button eyes seemed to look back at him with understanding, and James found himself thinking about Emma's face when she had first started losing her hair. 3 months ago, Emma had been a typical 8-year-old full of energy and laughter. She loved dancing, painting pictures of unicorns, and helping her mother bake cookies on Sunday afternoons. James would come home from his shifts at the palace to find her waiting by the window, still in her school uniform, eager to hear stories about the royal family and the important work her daddy did protecting them. The diagnosis had come like a lightning strike on a clear day. Sarah had taken Emma to the doctor because of persistent fatigue and strange bruises that appeared without explanation. James had been on duty during the appointment, standing guard outside a diplomatic dinner, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. When Sarah called him that evening, her voice shaking with barely controlled terror, James felt something inside him break. Childhood leukemia, the doctor had said, treatable but aggressive. Emma would need immediate chemotherapy, regular hospital stays, and constant monitoring. The survival rates were encouraging, but the journey ahead would be long and uncertain. James had thrown himself even deeper into his work after the diagnosis, reasoning that his family needed the stability and income that his position provided. The Royal Guard offered excellent medical benefits, and his job security was absolute as long as he maintained his performance standards. What he had not anticipated was how impossible it would become to focus on protecting others when his own child was fighting for her life. Every morning when he put on his uniform, James thought about Emma waking up feeling nauseous from her medications. While he stood at attention during royal ceremonies, he wondered if Sarah was sitting alone in another sterile hospital waiting room. When dignitaries praised the stoic dedication of the Royal Guard, James felt like a fraud, knowing that his mind was constantly elsewhere. The worst part was the helplessness. James had spent his entire adult life as a protector, trained to identify threats and neutralize them before they could cause harm. Yet cancer was an enemy he could not fight, could not intimidate, could not stand guard against. All he could do was watch his daughter grow thinner and weaker, while pretending to the world that everything was normal. Emma had started asking difficult questions. Why was Daddy always tired? Why could he not take time off to come to her doctor appointments? Why did he have to work when she felt so sick and scared? James had tried to explain about duty and responsibility, about the honor of serving the royal family, but his explanation sounded hollow even to his own ears. Sarah had been incredibly understanding, but James could see the strain wearing on her. She handled all the medical appointments alone, managed Emma's medication schedule, and tried to maintain some semblance of normal family life. When James came home exhausted from long shifts, Sarah would update him on Emma's progress while attempting to keep her own fears hidden. Last week, Emma had asked James if he loved his job more than he loved her. The question had come out of nowhere while he was helping her with homework, and it had hit him like a physical blow. Of course, he loved her more than anything in the world, but somehow his actions were not reflecting that truth. "I have to work to pay for your medicine, sweetheart," he had explained, but Emma's response had haunted him ever since. Tommy's daddy took time off when Tommy broke his leg. It was only a broken leg, but his daddy stayed home for 2 weeks. "I have cancer, but you never stay home with me." The comparison was unfair in many ways, but James could not shake the feeling that Emma was right. He was so focused on being the perfect guard that he was failing at being the father his daughter needed during the most frightening time of her life. Now, holding Prince George's teddy bear, James found himself thinking about the young prince's words. "Your eyes look like you need protecting too." How had a 10-year-old boy seen what James had been trying so hard to hide from everyone around him? The bear's soft fur reminded him of Emma's favorite blanket, the one she had carried to every hospital appointment. She called it her brave blanket because it helped her feel strong during the scary medical procedures. James realized that Prince George had given him something similar, a tangible source of comfort for moments when courage felt impossible to find. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos Sarah had sent from Emma's latest treatment session. His daughter was smiling in the pictures, but James could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that no 8-year-old should ever have. In one photo, she was holding up a drawing she had made for him, a picture of their family standing together under a rainbow. The drawing was titled "When Daddy Comes Home," and it showed James in his Red Guard uniform. But instead of standing at the palace, he was in their living room, hugging Emma and Sarah. It was such a simple wish, but it revealed everything about what his daughter truly wanted from him. James looked at Mr. Buttons again and made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. Prince George had trusted him with something precious, something that represented comfort and love in its purest form. Perhaps it was time for James to trust himself with something equally precious, the remaining time he had with his daughter while she fought this battle. The royal family would continue to exist without him, protected by other dedicated guards. But Emma only had one father, and she needed him now more than she had ever needed anyone in her entire short life. That evening, James sat at his kitchen table with Mr. Buttons positioned carefully beside Emma's homework papers. Sarah was upstairs helping their daughter with her bedtime routine, which now included a complex schedule of medications and careful monitoring of her temperature. The house felt different these days, quieter and more fragile, as if they were all holding their breath waiting for good news that seemed perpetually just out of reach. When Emma came downstairs to say goodnight, she stopped in surprise at seeing the teddy bear. Her eyes, which had been dull with fatigue just moments before, suddenly brightened with curiosity. "Whose bear is that, Daddy?" she asked, moving closer to examine. Mr. Buttons, with the careful attention that sick children often develop for new things in their environment. James felt his throat tighten as he prepared to tell her about his extraordinary day. "This is Mr. Buttons. He belongs to Prince George, but the prince asked me to take care of him for a while." Emma's mouth opened in amazement. Like most children her age, she was fascinated by the royal family, and the idea that her father had spoken directly with Prince George seemed impossible to believe. "Really? Prince George gave you his teddy bear?" "He did," James confirmed, lifting Emma onto his lap despite her protests that she was too big for such treatment. "He said that Mr. Buttons has special powers for helping people who are scared or sick feel better." Emma reached out tentatively to touch the bear's worn fur. "Why did he give it to you instead of keeping it for himself?" The question went straight to the heart of what had been troubling James all day. I think he could tell that I was worried about someone very important to me, someone who needed extra help feeling brave. Emma studied her father's face with the intense scrutiny that children reserve for moments when they sense adults are telling them something significant. "Were you worried about me?" James nodded, unable to trust his voice to remain steady. For months he had tried to shield Emma from understanding how terrified he was of losing her. He had maintained a facade of confidence and strength, believing that was what she needed from him. But Prince George's simple gesture had shown him that sometimes the greatest gift was honest vulnerability. "I have been very worried about you, sweetheart. More worried than I have ever been about anything in my entire life." Emma leaned against his chest, and James could feel how much weight she had lost, how fragile she had become. "I have been worried too, Daddy. Not just about being sick, but about you. You seem so sad lately, and you are always at work. Sometimes I think maybe you do not want to be here with me because being sick makes me not fun anymore." The confession shattered James's heart completely. All his efforts to maintain normalcy and provide stability had instead made his daughter feel abandoned during the scariest time of her life. He wrapped his arms around her more tightly, breathing in the scent of the special shampoo Sarah used for Emma's thinning hair. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the most important thing in my entire world. More important than my job, more important than anything else that exists. I would give up everything I have if it would make you healthy again." Emma pulled back to look at his face, searching for the truth in his expression. "Then why do you go to work every day instead of staying here with me?" It was such a simple question, but it cut through all of James's rationalizations and excuses. He had been telling himself that work was necessary, that providing financial stability was the most important thing he could do for his family. But the truth was more complicated and more painful to acknowledge. "I thought that going to work was the best way to take care of you," he admitted. "I thought that if I kept doing my job perfectly, somehow everything would be okay. But I think I was wrong. I think maybe the best way to take care of you is to be here with you." Emma nodded solemnly, as if his words confirmed something she had already suspected. "Mr. Buttons thinks so too. I can tell by the way he is looking at us." James glanced at the teddy bear and realized that Emma was right. There was something about the toy's presence that seemed to encourage honesty and courage. Prince George had given him more than just a comfort object. He had given him permission to prioritize love over duty. That night, after Emma had gone to bed carrying Mr. Buttons with her, James sat down with Sarah to have the most important conversation of his marriage. He told her about Prince George's gesture, about the moment of recognition that had passed between them, and about the decision that had been forming in his mind all day. "I want to resign from the Royal Guard," he said quietly. "I want to be here for Emma's treatments, to take her to appointments, to hold her hand when she is scared. I want to be the father she needs instead of the soldier I think I should be." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and James could see her weighing the implications of what he was suggesting. The financial security, the family legacy, the career he had built over 2 decades, all of it would disappear if he left his position. "What would we do for work?" she asked finally. "The medical bills are enormous, and Emma's treatment will continue for at least 2 more years." James had been thinking about this all evening. "I could apply for positions with private security firms or maybe teach at the police academy. The pay would not be as good, and we would lose some benefits, but we have savings and there are programs to help families dealing with childhood cancer. We would find a way to make it work." Sarah reached across the table to take his hand. "Are you sure about this? The Royal Guard has been your entire identity for so long. What if you regret giving it up?" James thought about Emma's drawing, about the way she had lit up when she saw Mr. Buttons, about the question she had asked about whether he loved his job more than he loved her. "I think I would regret not giving it up. Emma only gets one childhood, and she is spending it fighting for her life. I do not want her to remember this time as the period when her father was never around." They talked until nearly midnight, working through the practical details and emotional implications of such a major life change. By the time they went to bed, they had made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. The next morning, James wrote a formal letter of resignation to Captain Williams. In it, he explained that family circumstances required his immediate attention, and that he was requesting to be released from duty as soon as possible. He did not mention Prince George or the teddy bear, but he thought about both as he sealed the envelope that would end his military career. When he delivered the letter, Captain Williams looked surprised but not entirely shocked. "This is about your daughter, is it not?" he asked gently. James nodded. "She needs me more than the royal family does." "Sir?" Captain Williams studied the resignation letter for a moment before looking back at James. "You know, Mitchell, there is no shame in choosing family over duty. In fact, I would argue that protecting your own child is the highest form of service there is." The words gave James a sense of peace he had not felt in months. As he walked home to tell Emma that he would be staying with her for all her future treatments, he carried Mr. Buttons in his pocket, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can change everything. The photographs from that morning outside Kensington Palace had been circulating among royal photographers for days before anyone understood their true significance. Initially, they seemed like just another charming moment of Prince George interacting with palace staff, the kind of heartwarming image that royal watchers love to share on social media. It was Emma who inadvertently broke the story to the world. During her next chemotherapy session at Great Ormond Street Hospital, she proudly showed Mr. Buttons to her favorite nurse, explaining in vivid detail how Prince George had given the teddy bear to her daddy to help make her feel better. The nurse, moved by the story, mentioned it to a colleague who told a friend, who happened to work as a freelance journalist. Within hours, reporters were connecting the dots between the photographs and James's sudden resignation from the Royal Guard. The story that emerged was one of extraordinary compassion and human connection that transcended social barriers and royal protocol. Prince's teddy bear gift leads guard to choose family over duty. Read the headline in the Daily Mail. The Sun went with, "Little Prince's big heart saves sick girl's family," while The Guardian took a more measured approach with royal gesture highlights healthcare, struggles for working families. The story spread like wildfire across social media platforms. The original photographs of Prince George offering the teddy bear to James were shared millions of times, accompanied by hashtags like Royal Compassion and Mr. Buttons. People around the world were touched by the image of a 10-year-old boy recognizing another person's pain and responding with such genuine kindness. James found himself at the center of a media storm he had never anticipated. Reporters camped outside his modest home in South London, hoping for interviews or additional photographs. His phone rang constantly with requests from television programs, magazines, and documentary filmmakers who wanted to tell his story. The attention was overwhelming and uncomfortable for someone who had spent his career maintaining anonymity and privacy. James declined most interview requests, but he did agree to speak with one respected royal correspondent who had covered his regiment fairly over the years. "I want people to understand that what Prince George did was not about publicity or media attention," James explained during the carefully arranged interview. "It was simply a young boy seeing that someone was hurting and wanting to help. That kind of natural compassion is remarkable in anyone, but especially in someone so young who could easily have ignored the struggles of ordinary people." The interview was conducted in James's living room, with Emma playing quietly in the background, Mr. Buttons never far from her side. When the journalist asked Emma about the teddy bear, her face lit up with joy. "Mr. Buttons is the best medicine I have ever had," she declared with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "He sits with me during my treatments and makes the scary machines seem less frightening." Prince George was very smart to know that I needed him. The journalist was clearly moved by Emma's innocence and resilience. When the article was published, it painted a picture of a family dealing with extraordinary circumstances with grace and dignity, supported by an unexpected act of kindness from one of the world's most famous children. Meanwhile, Kensington Palace found itself in the unusual position of managing positive press about Prince George's spontaneous gesture. The royal communications team, accustomed to carefully orchestrated public appearances and scripted interactions, had to respond to a story that had developed entirely outside their control. Prince William and Catherine were reportedly very proud of their son's actions, but they were also concerned about the precedent it might set and the expectations it could create for future public appearances. The palace issued a brief statement acknowledging the story and expressing their pleasure that Prince George's gesture had brought comfort to a family in need. "Their Royal Highnesses have always taught their children the importance of compassion and service to others," the statement read. They are proud that Prince George acted on these values in such a thoughtful way. What the statement did not reveal was Prince George's own reaction to the media attention. According to palace sources who spoke anonymously, the young prince was initially confused by all the fuss over what he considered a simple act of friendship. He had not expected the gesture to become public knowledge and was concerned that James might be embarrassed by the attention. The prince reportedly asked his parents if he could call James to apologize for the media storm, but palace protocol prevented direct contact between the royal family and former staff members without proper channels. Instead, a private message was conveyed through official channels, expressing Prince George's hope that the attention would not cause additional stress for James's family. Public reaction to the story was overwhelmingly positive, with people from around the world sharing their own experiences of unexpected kindness during difficult times. Social media was flooded with stories of strangers who had helped during medical crises, children who had shown remarkable empathy, and ordinary heroes who had made extraordinary differences in people's lives. Several charitable organizations reported increased donations and volunteer applications following the story's publication. The children's cancer charity that Prince George had been visiting on the day of his gesture saw a particularly significant surge in support, with many donors specifically mentioning the teddy bear story as their motivation for giving. However, not all reactions were positive. Some critics argued that the story was being exploited for publicity purposes, suggesting that the royal family had orchestrated the entire incident for positive press coverage. Others questioned whether it was appropriate for a guard to accept gifts from members of the royal family, even in such circumstances. James found these criticisms particularly frustrating because they missed the point entirely. "This was never about publicity or protocol," he said to Sarah one evening as they watched the latest news coverage. "It was about a little boy who saw that someone needed help and decided to do something about it. People who try to make it about anything else are missing the beauty of what actually happened." The media attention also brought unexpected opportunities. James received several job offers from private security firms who had been impressed by his background and the publicity surrounding his story. A publisher approached him about writing a book about his experiences, and a television production company inquired about developing a documentary. Most importantly, the story connected James's family with other families dealing with childhood cancer. Parents from around the world reached out to share their own experiences, offer support, and exchange advice about navigating the challenges of pediatric oncology. Emma received hundreds of letters and packages from children who had been inspired by her story, creating a network of young warriors fighting similar battles. As the initial media frenzy began to settle, James reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that morning outside Kensington Palace. Prince George's simple gesture had not only given him permission to prioritize his family, but it had also connected him with a community of people who understood his struggles and wanted to help. 3 months after the teddy bear incident, the impact of that brief moment continued to ripple through both James's and Prince George's lives in ways neither had anticipated. The simple gesture had fundamentally changed how both of them understood the power of human connection and the responsibility that comes with recognizing another person's pain. For James, the transition from royal guard to full-time father had been both challenging and rewarding beyond his wildest expectations. Without the demanding schedule of palace duties, he was able to be present for every one of Emma's medical appointments. He learned the names of all her nurses, understood her treatment protocol in detail, and became an expert advocate for her care. The difference in Emma's demeanor was remarkable. Where she had once been withdrawn and anxious about her treatments, she now approached them with considerably more confidence, knowing that her father would be there to hold her hand through every procedure. Mr. Buttons accompanied them to every appointment, and the teddy bear had become something of a celebrity among the hospital staff. Emma's entire attitude changed when her father started coming to treatments, observed Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's oncologist. We see this often with pediatric cancer patients. The presence and emotional availability of parents can significantly impact how children cope with treatment. In Emma's case, the improvement has been quite dramatic. James had found work with a private security consulting firm that specialized in protecting corporate executives. The pay was lower than his Royal Guard salary, but the schedule was more flexible, allowing him to maintain his primary role as Emma's caregiver. His new colleagues, many of whom were former military personnel themselves, understood his priorities and supported his family-first approach to work. More significantly, James had discovered a new sense of purpose through his volunteer work with families dealing with childhood cancer. He had started facilitating a support group for parents at Great Ormond Street Hospital, helping other mothers and fathers navigate the emotional challenges of having a seriously ill child. James brings a unique perspective, explained Margaret Foster, the hospital's family support coordinator. He understands the struggle between professional responsibilities and family needs because he lived it himself. Other parents relate to his story and find hope in his decision to prioritize his child's needs. The support group had grown from 3 families to more than 20, with James serving as both facilitator and living proof that it was possible to choose family over career without losing one's sense of identity or purpose. His military bearing and obvious competence reassured other parents that stepping back from work did not mean giving up entirely. Meanwhile, Prince George's understanding of his role and responsibilities had evolved significantly since his encounter with James. The 10-year-old had always been aware of his privileged position, but the response to his teddy bear gesture had shown him the real power he possessed to impact people's lives. His tutors reported that the prince had become more engaged in lessons about social responsibility and charitable work. He asked thoughtful questions about how royal patronages functioned and expressed particular interest in organizations that supported families dealing with medical crises. Prince George has always been a compassionate child, said one palace insider who spoke on condition of anonymity. But this experience seems to have crystallized something for him about the purpose of royal service. He understands now that small acts of kindness can have enormous consequences. The prince had also become more observant of the staff members who worked at the palace, where he had once passed by guards and servants with polite but distant acknowledgement. He now made an effort to really see them as individuals. He remembered names, asked about families, and showed genuine interest in their well-being. This change had not gone unnoticed by the palace staff. His Royal Highness has developed a remarkable ability to connect with people, observed Mrs. Patricia Hughes, who had worked in various capacities at royal residences for over 30 years. He seems to understand that every person has a story, and he treats everyone with genuine respect and interest. Prince George had also requested more information about the charities his family supported, particularly those focused on children's health and family welfare. He had begun accompanying his parents to more official engagements, showing a maturity and engagement that impressed seasoned royal watchers. The story of Mr. Buttons had inspired other acts of kindness throughout the royal household. Staff members reported increased camaraderie and mutual support, as if Prince George's gesture had given everyone permission to show more compassion toward one another. 6 months after James's resignation, he received an unexpected invitation that would bring his story full circle. The palace requested his presence at a private reception, honoring volunteers who had made significant contributions to children's charities. The invitation specifically mentioned his work with the support group at Great Ormond Street Hospital. James was nervous about returning to Kensington Palace, but Emma was thrilled at the possibility of meeting Prince George again. Her cancer treatment was progressing well, and she had regained much of her energy and enthusiasm. Mr. Buttons remained her constant companion, but he now represented triumph over fear rather than comfort during crisis. At the reception, James found himself in the surreal position of being introduced to Prince William and Catherine as an honored guest, rather than a member of their security detail. The Duke and Duchess were gracious and genuinely interested in hearing about his work with other families. "What you have accomplished since leaving our service is truly remarkable," Prince William told him during their conversation. "You have turned a personal challenge into an opportunity to help others, which is exactly the kind of service we hope to inspire through our charitable work." When Prince George arrived at the reception, he seemed momentarily surprised to see James, but his face quickly broke into a genuine smile of recognition. The prince had grown taller in the months since their last encounter, and he carried himself with increased confidence and poise. "How is Emma?" were his first words to James, spoken with the kind of genuine concern that had characterized their original interaction. "She is doing very well, Your Highness," James replied, Her treatment is progressing exactly as the doctors hoped, and she asked me to tell you that Mr. Buttons has been taking excellent care of her." Prince George's smile widened at this news. "I am so glad to hear that. Mr. Buttons is very good at his job." What followed was a brief but meaningful conversation about Emma's progress, James's new work, and the impact their story had had on other families. Prince George listened with the same intense attention he had shown during their first encounter, asking thoughtful questions and expressing genuine pleasure at Emma's recovery. As the reception concluded, Prince George made one final gesture that brought their relationship full circle. He presented James with a small wrapped package, explaining that it contained a new teddy bear for Emma to keep as her own. "Mr. Buttons will always belong to me," the prince explained. "But Emma deserves to have her own special friend. This one is called Sir Courage, and he is trained specifically for helping brave girls who fight dragons." James accepted the gift with deep gratitude, understanding that this was not just a toy, but a symbol of the lasting connection that had formed between two families from completely different worlds. Prince George's gesture had changed the trajectory of James's life, but it had also taught the young prince about the power of compassion to transform both the giver and receiver of kindness. 1 year after Prince George handed Mr. Buttons to James Mitchell outside Kensington Palace, Emma rang the bell at Great Ormond Street Hospital to celebrate the completion of her cancer treatment. The tradition of bell ringing marked the end of active therapy for pediatric cancer patients, and Emma's ceremony drew a crowd of nurses, doctors, and family friends who had supported her throughout her journey. James stood beside his daughter as she pulled the rope with both hands, the clear chime echoing through the hospital corridors like a declaration of victory. Sarah wiped away tears of joy while holding Sir Courage, the teddy bear Prince George had given Emma at the charity reception. Mr. Buttons sat in a place of honor on the reception desk, having been returned to Prince George with a handwritten thank you letter from Emma. "Today marks the end of Emma's treatment, but it also represents the beginning of a new chapter for our entire family," James said to the assembled group. "This journey taught us that the most important battles are fought not with swords or shields, but with love, presence, and the courage to prioritize what truly matters." Dr. Chen smiled as she congratulated Emma on reaching this milestone. Emma has shown remarkable strength throughout her treatment, but what made the biggest difference was the unwavering support of her family. Having her father present for every appointment, every procedure, and every moment of fear made an immeasurable impact on her healing process. The support group that James had started at the hospital had grown into a formal program with dedicated funding and professional oversight. More than 50 families had participated over the past year, and the group had become a model for other hospitals around the country. James had been offered a full-time position developing similar programs at other medical centers, work that would allow him to use his experience to help countless other families. Emma's recovery had been featured in several medical journals as an example of how family support could positively impact treatment outcomes. While the cancer treatment itself deserved primary credit for her healing, doctors acknowledged that the emotional stability provided by her father's presence had contributed significantly to her resilience. Throughout the process, the story of Prince George's gesture had continued to inspire people around the world. The hashtag Mr. Buttons had become associated with acts of unexpected kindness, and social media was regularly filled with stories of people helping strangers in small but meaningful ways. Several children's hospitals had started teddy bear donation programs specifically inspired by the royal teddy bear story. More importantly, the incident had influenced how the royal family approached their public engagements. Prince George's spontaneous act of compassion had demonstrated the power of authentic human connection over carefully scripted interactions. Palace officials had begun incorporating more opportunities for genuine engagement into royal visits, understanding that real moments of connection served the monarchy's mission better than traditional formal protocols. Prince George himself had become increasingly involved in charitable work, focused on children's health and family welfare. His parents had arranged for him to visit several children's hospitals, where his natural ability to connect with young patients and their families had proven remarkable. The prince had developed a reputation for remembering details about the children he met and following up on their progress through palace staff. At 11 years old, Prince George was already showing signs of the compassionate leadership that would one day define his reign. His tutors reported that he had become particularly interested in studying how monarchs throughout history had used their positions to help their subjects during times of crisis. He had asked thoughtful questions about the balance between ceremony and service, tradition and innovation. The connection between Prince George and James's family had continued through carefully managed correspondence. Emma had sent the prince regular updates about her treatment progress, accompanied by drawings and photographs of Sir Courage, accompanying her to various appointments. Prince George had responded with encouragement and small gifts, always appropriate and thoughtful. When Emma achieved remission, Prince George had sent a handwritten letter congratulating her on her bravery and strength. The letter, written in the careful penmanship of a boy who was learning the weight of his words, concluded with a sentence that brought tears to James's eyes. "You fought your dragon and won, just like I knew you would." The media attention around their story had gradually faded, but the impact continued to resonate in unexpected ways. James had received hundreds of letters from parents around the world who had been inspired to make similar choices about prioritizing family over career during medical crises. Many credited his example with giving them permission to step back from work obligations without guilt or shame. Several corporations had also been influenced by the story, implementing more flexible policies for employees dealing with family medical emergencies. The idea that a person's value was not diminished by choosing family over professional advancement had gained traction in discussions about work-life balance and employee support. As Emma's first year of remission progressed, the Mitchell family had established new traditions and priorities. James had returned to full-time work, but with a completely different perspective on the relationship between career and family. His new position directing family support programs at a major children's hospital network allowed him to use his experience to help other families while maintaining the flexibility to be present for Emma's ongoing medical follow-ups. Emma had returned to school with a maturity and perspective that amazed her teachers. She had become an advocate for other children facing serious illnesses, organizing fundraisers and awareness campaigns with the same determination she had shown during her own treatment. Sir Courage remained her constant companion, but now he served as a symbol of triumph rather than comfort during crisis. On the first anniversary of Prince George's gesture, Emma wrote a final letter to the prince, thanking him for the kindness that had changed her family's life. In the letter, she included a photograph of herself ringing the bell at the hospital, with a caption that read, "Mr. Buttons taught me that brave people help other people be brave too." Prince George's response, delivered through official channels, was brief but profound. "Thank you for teaching me that small gestures can have big consequences. I will remember that lesson for the rest of my life." The story of a 10-year-old prince and a worried father had become something larger than either of them had imagined. It had demonstrated that compassion transcends social boundaries, that authentic human connection can inspire extraordinary change, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can alter the trajectory of entire lives. For James Mitchell, Prince George's simple gesture had given him permission to choose love over duty, presence over protocol, and family over career advancement. For Prince George, the encounter had taught him that true royal service meant seeing and responding to the needs of individual people, not just performing ceremonial functions. Their brief interaction outside Kensington Palace had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact would influence both their lives forever. In a world often divided by class, wealth, and social barriers, a teddy bear named Mr. Buttons had proven that human kindness recognizes no such boundaries, and that the willingness to help others in their moments of greatest need is perhaps the most royal quality of all.